Hi there, this is Jackie and Alyssa from the Studio for Art and Craft in Cobleskill. And today's project is what we call Christmas Under the Stars. So the sample that you're looking at right now is on our platter in the blue color scheme. But we also can do this. You have the choice to do this either on the platter or on this large plate. And this is what it looks like if you do it in the purples. So those are the two. I think the purple color has been super popular, but so has the platter. So you're going to have a lot of decisions to make if you want to join this. All you have to do is order our kit from the studioforartandcraft.com, and everything that I'm about to tell you about is going to be in that kit. And you can follow along with this video. You can pause us. You can speed us up, whatever makes you happy. So we're going to do our sample today on a plate. So we'll assume you're doing a plate. In your kit, you're also going to receive all the glaze colors that you're going to need. You're going to receive a little bit container that has this powder in it. This you'll be using with the silk screens, which Alyssa's going to explain in a minute. We'll include brushes, and this is for odd things. How about this, huh? A toothbrush, which we'll also explain, I promise. And then these are the silk screens that you use to put on the trees. A large one and a small one. And you'll also get this big plastic container that you'll fill with about 1 inch of water. I think that's everything. You'll also want to have yourself a cup of water. Oh, yes, and you'll also get a little container of rubbing alcohol. So everything that Alyssa is going to show you, everything she's going to use, other than maybe you want to have a little paper towel or something with you. But we usually put a paper towel in anyway. So everything you're going to need is going to be in your kit. Let's just leave it at that.
Yes.
So with that, I am going to turn this over to Alyssa, who's made both of those samples I just showed you. So she's the pro here, and we'll walk you through this step by step.
Okay. Just gonna make sure everything's set. So the first step, I'm going to do the blue sample today. So I'll be using the blue paints. And the first color I'm going to use is the lighter blue, which is a 34, and you're going to take this round brush that you have about 2.5 inches from the bottom of the plate. You're going to take that color, and you're just going to make just a line. So this is just kind of to help us know where to place things and where we want the bottom snow compared to the top where the trees will be. There. And what you'll also do is you'll do 2 small dashes at the bottom and the top. The bottom, you're going to do them 4 inches apart. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm never exact with this. So you're just going to do it 4 inches apart. And then at the top, you're going to do it 2 inches apart. And this is so you get that. And it's going to look like a little bit of a triangle. This is where that big tree is going to sit in the middle. You're going to take them and you're just going to connect them. It doesn't have to be perfect. Mine is not perfect, but I promise it'll look great at the end. So you're just going to attach those right here. Okay, perfect. So once you have that all done, the next step, you're going to take your fan brush that you'll get in your kit, and you're going to take white. You're just going to get it all in your fan brush, and what you're going to do is you're going to do 2 coats of white on the inside of this little triangle shape you just made. It doesn't need to be perfect. If you go a little bit outside the lines, it's not a problem, and I will tell you why in a little bit, why it's a-okay. And then you do want to let your coats dry a little bit in between. Once it starts to lose that shiny look that the paint has, you can go and do your second coat. I tend to like to do long strokes with the fan brush just because it comes out looking a little bit better. Obviously you can turn the brush a little bit when you're trying to get into these thinner areas because the fan brush is a little bigger. So then you're just gonna rinse your fan brush off because we're gonna continue to use it with some other colors. Dry it off a little bit on your paper towel. Next, you're gonna take that same color you did the little outlines with, so the 34 blue, the lighter blue, and you're gonna take it and apply 2 coats of this blue on the outside of what you just did. It doesn't really matter how thick this line is, it's up to you. You could make it a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker. I do probably about like 2 inches of size, or just the size of the fan brush. And it's okay if you get it in the white a little bit, because what we'll be doing is we'll be blending these lines so it's not as harsh. So it's a little bit of a softer transition between the white and the blues. So I'm just gonna wait a second before I apply more. Okay, so here's a tip that I use to blend the 2 colors. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna make sure your brush is wet. And then you're just gonna take it and run it across the spot where the white and the blue meet. And that'll just blend it together. As you can see already, it's just looking a little bit softer, a little less harsh. So you'll just blend it like that. You are able to, if you, for some reason, take too much blue over to the white, you can take more white, put it down, but I always make sure to just make sure it's wet. So a little bit more water in the paint, and then you can take more white and put it back down in the middle if you feel like you went too far over with the blue. But you see here, you can do the same with the blue as well. Add more blue, blend it in. We just want to make sure that the lines aren't as harsh. I messed up a little bit there, but that's not a problem. You'll see in a second. Okay. So once we do that, we're gonna use the fan brush again, but this time we're gonna be doing 2 coats of a darker blue, which is number 41. And we're gonna go and fill in the rest of the space that is empty with no paint. See, that little spot I messed up, not a problem. Going right over it with some darker blue. And again, it is okay if you get it in the lighter blue because we will be blending this as well. Get my first coat up on there. Typically, it won't take too long to dry since these are like the first and second coats on a plate. It tends to absorb the paint a lot quicker, so you won't be waiting too long. All right, my coats there. All right, you see how the lines are a little bit rough? It doesn't look as nice. What I'm gonna do, so I'm just gonna do the same thing I did earlier. I'm gonna wet my brush, and then I'm just gonna come over top of where the colors meet and just do a little bit of blending. And the important thing to remember, if you are blending and you have a lot of water and you're blending a little bit too hard, sometimes the paint will come up and you'll start seeing the actual plate below it. If that happens, you can just add some more paint in. It's not a problem. Just blend that in right there. Just want to make the edges look really nice. You can also continue to rinse your brush as you do it. Add more water. See, I'm getting to the point where I think I have a little bit of plate showing. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna add some of that lighter blue in here. Just make sure I have enough paint. Now I'm gonna go back over, just blend it a little bit more, probably take some of the darker. You can really play around with this a little bit. You just wanna make sure you don't have too much paint that piles up, but since the brush is wet and it's really just mainly blending things, it shouldn't be an issue. Okay, perfect. So that is that. So this is what I consider the fun step. So what you're gonna do, we'll be next using the color 31. So it's like a medium blue. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take some water and mix it with that blue. And you really want it to be like 50-50, like 50 water, 50% paint, because you want to be able to lightly sweep it over your plate. And we're gonna do this over the lighter section here in the middle. So I see, as you can see, my mess over here, but I have it pretty mixed. It's pretty wet, but it'll be easy enough to sweep over. Also, I dripped that, but that's not a problem either. There we go. Okay. So you'll take that and you'll just, this step needs to be done pretty quickly. You don't want to wait too long because the paint needs to be wet. You'll be getting a container of rubbing alcohol. It won't be like this, but this is what I have. And you'll have like a little square brush. I think this is what works best. You're gonna take that. I just prematurely put it in the rubbing alcohol, make sure it's wet with the rubbing alcohol so I can move from this step to the rubbing alcohol quickly before the paint dries. So what you're gonna do is go over this light section. You're just gonna sweep this over. And then immediately, you're gonna take that rubbing alcohol and you're gonna sprinkle it. And you can see what happens. It's pretty cool. You'll be able to tell if your paint isn't wet enough if it doesn't create these bubbles. So if this is what happens, you know you did it right. This is going to have to dry for a quick second before you move on to the next step. So I am okay, so I'm just gonna move on to the next step, which is you're gonna be doing the same thing with the rubbing alcohol, just with a different color. So you're gonna go back to that lighter blue that you had before, which is the 34 blue, and you're gonna mix that with some water. Same thing, 50% water, 50% paint. You want a easily spreadable texture of the paint. I'm just gonna mix it around, get that ready. Okay. See, I have it. And then what I'm gonna do is do this over the darker sections. So I'm just gonna quickly go over this. And while it's still wet, sprinkle it. There we go. If you see like you want a little bit more in here, like I messed up, I want a little bit more, you can take your brush just lightly with some water, just blend it a little bit and then sprinkle a little bit more on there, and that should give a little bit of a look. This will take a second to dry, so we're just gonna wait on that. In order to dry your plate, put it in front of a fan. It shouldn't take too long to naturally dry. Now that my plate is dry, I'm just gonna do 2 coats of white at the bottom of the plate where we don't have any paint at the moment. And again, it's okay if a little bit of blue gets in it. I tend to like to add a little bit of blue to it just to give it more dimension. Just gonna wait for that to dry to do my second coat. I can talk about our next step while I'm waiting. So the next step is we're going to be applying the silk screens. So these are what we'll be using. The first one we'll use is the larger silk screen, so the big tree. So I'm just going to wait until I'm done with my coats of white. Another thing I'll mention while this dries is I want the edges to be plain white. You can take some of the blue and whatnot that we're using earlier and you can go along the edges and just go a little bit farther down onto the plate. Like I'll do that with the white for you. So I'll just go down here. So you can do that around the plate, but with the blue up here. So you'll just see the blue around it. While it's drying, I will mix up my silkscreen paint. So for the big tree, we're gonna use the darkest blue that we have, which will be labeled 19. So I'm gonna use the aluminum foil and I'm just gonna pour some paint on it. You'll then take this powder that you were given, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna pour some on top of the paint. And I like to take the end of my brush to mix it in. You can just clean off the end after, but you want to make sure you fully mix it. So we want the paint to be thick enough so where it won't bleed through the silkscreen. So what I have right now is still a little too thin. So I'm going to add more powder. And a reminder, when you're using this, this does dry pretty quickly. So once you get it to the right texture, you want to move on to do your silkscreen as quickly as possible, because it becomes a lot harder to use once it dries up, and it's not good for the silkscreen. Okay, so I seem to have it the right consistency. It's not too thin, not too thick. So this is the messy part. All right, so I take my plate, and you're just gonna align the tree silkscreen so that you want it a little bit onto the white bottom you just did. You don't want it to sit exactly on that harsh line. It won't look as nice. So you just want to pull it down a little bit, and you want to try to kind of center it in that lighter triangle that you made. Okay. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a little off. You could just set it there, make sure you like where it is. You can lift it up and adjust it. Just look at where it is on the plate. Okay, so I like it right there. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the paint with your finger. This is the messy part. And you're gonna make sure you're holding the silkscreen down. If you're doing this with anyone else, you can have them help you. They can hold the edges of the silkscreen while you rub the paint in. I think is the word I'm going for. And you'll just rub the paint into the silkscreen, and you want to make sure you get all those all this blank empty space. You want to fill that in, because if you don't, you'll have some parts of the tree missing. And you want to try your best not to shift the silkscreen around while it's on the plate, or else the image of the tree won't come out as clearly, could be off. All right, put it in. Okay. Okay. And if you don't make enough paint, you can have someone help you make a little bit more, or you can make a little bit more yourself. The paint should dry in the time where you need to make a little bit more, so it should be okay. All right, and I'm just gonna go over, give it one last good rub through, make sure I got all my spaces with paint. Oh, I missed a spot on the edge there. Okay, then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna peel it off immediately, and see, look, there's the tree. So next step is pretty important. As soon as you do this, I'm gonna slide my plate out of the way. You're gonna wanna clean the silkscreen. So that is when this container of water comes into play. So you'll just take the silkscreen, put it in water, and you'll use the toothbrush to rub it off. Find it's a lot easier to clean it when you have something to scrape it, like this toothbrush. Please don't use any other things besides the toothbrush that we give you to clean these off, just because we don't know what they were used for beforehand and it could affect the paint. So you just want to get in there, scrub it off. You'll need to do this every time you use the silk screen, besides a couple steps where I will let you know when you don't have to clean it right afterwards. Especially if you're doing this in a group of people, you'll definitely want to clean it in between every person. See, there's no more paint left. Take any towel and kind of lay it out, and then lay the silk screen down. And then what I do is I just fold the towel over and just kind of pat it dry. And you want to make sure it's dry enough before you use it again. Usually a couple pats will do it. Okay, and then we'll just set this silk screen to the side for right now. I'll bring my plate back. So you've got your first large tree in the center of the plate. Next, we're gonna do the smaller tree. So we'll be using this small silkscreen. You're gonna use the same dark blue that you did before. So you're gonna wanna mix some more paint with the silkscreen powder if you don't have any left. I do not, so I'm gonna mix some more. It's the same process, just mix it until it's that right texture. So what you're gonna wanna do with the small trees, you're gonna put them a little bit forward, kind of at the same level of the large tree. And these are gonna be towards the outside of the plate. It doesn't have to fully sit on the plate. As you can see, mine's gonna go over the edge a little bit. That's okay. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna hold the silkscreen the same way you held the big one. You could also have someone help you if you're doing this with someone else. You can have them hold it. And I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna rub it in. So this is where you don't have to wash the silkscreen right afterwards, because we're gonna use it for another tree on the other side. This one you wanna be a little bit more careful because it's easy to go off the edge of the paint. You can see I'm pretty close, so I'm just being careful that I do not do that. Just gonna make sure I rub it all in. All right, so I've got that, and there's that tree. You're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Line it up. Okay, do the same thing. Rub it in there pretty good. You don't have to be as rough as I am, but you want to make sure that it's rubbed in pretty well. You cover all the spaces. What you're going to want to do with this is, again, you're going to move it to your bucket and you're going to clean it off. You guys saw what I did with the bigger silkscreen, so you're just going to do the same thing with the smaller one. Clean it off and dry it the same exact way as before. So then we're going to use the little tree silkscreen again, and this time we're going to be using black. So we're going to want to make that paint mixture with the black. I'm going to take the end of my brush, obviously clean it off, wipe off that old paint, and I'll use the end of my brush to stir this again. Also, if you tend to add a little bit too much and it's a little too dry, you can always add another splash of paint and mix it around to get it back to the texture you want. Okay, perfect. So with these trees, we're gonna wanna do them a little bit higher up than these ones. So we wanna make it look like these trees are behind the smaller trees. So they're up a little bit higher. We don't wanna put them down on that line where it transfers from the blue to the white bottom. So we wanna put it a little bit higher. It can overlap with the other trees, but if you see a space where it overlaps, like my big tree overlaps over here, I can see the blue underneath the silkscreen. You just want to avoid that area, so you'll just go around it. Do the same thing, make sure it's rubbed in really well. And then you'll pull it off. And then again, you don't need to wash this in between this step because it's the same color tree. You're just going to do it on the other side. You're welcome to clean it off in between if you'd like. Perfect. And then you're going to want to clean that off right away and dry it off the same way you did with the large tree stencil. Okay, you're gonna want to let your silk screens dry a little bit. Shouldn't take long since it's a thinner layer of paint. The next step, we're still going to be using silk screens, except we're going to be using this part of the larger tree. So this will be the snow that goes over top of the trees. So again, you're going to want to take your white paint and we're going to make the same mixture using the powder to thicken it up. I'm going to clean off my brush of the old paint so I don't get any of that mixed with the white. Also, I should mention, if you run out of space on your tin foil, which I tend to do because I'm a messy painter and I use a lot of space, you can use just another strip of regular tin foil to put more of your paints if you run out of space, or you could try cleaning it off, whatever you would like to do. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna line up the silk screen with the trees, so it won't be perfect. Take as long as you need to try to line it up. I pretty much lined up. You're gonna take that mixture you just made, you're gonna do the same thing, you're gonna hold down the silk screen and you're gonna rub it in. We're gonna use this silk screen again, but for the smaller trees. And we'll just line the top section up of this, so this little section up here with the smaller trees, and add snow above those as well. We're just gonna do that to all 4 of the small trees. Again, you don't really need to do this. If you would like to skip it, you can feel that it just gives it a little bit something extra, but it is quite hard to line up. So if you'd like to clean it in between, clean the silk screen in between, you can do that as well. And you really want to make sure when you're done with this step, you want to immediately wash this, because this has been sitting for a while with the paint on it. You want to make sure you give it a good scrub. Once you're done washing it, you're going to want to make sure you dry it as well. Since you won't be needing the stencils anymore, what you can do is you can just lay them out in your towel. You don't necessarily need to pat them dry. You can just lay them out flat to air dry, and you want to really make sure that those stencils are flat, because if they curve, they're a lot harder to use. The next step we're going to do is we're going to take some white. Just regular white paint, you don't need to mix it with anything. And you'll take your round brush again, so mine's already been cleaned off. And what I do is you'll go over the areas where the snow is on this tree, and you'll just add a little bit more texture, make the snow a little bit more brighter. So I'm just gonna go over top and just add some more snow. It's okay if it's a little bit thicker. I tend to like it that way. It looks a little bit better to me. A little less translucent if you do it thicker. Also, it tends to give the plate a little bit more texture, which is neat. So you're just gonna go along and you're gonna do this on all the little spots you want to. You can skip some. Say if I don't want snow over here on that, I'm not gonna put it over there. I'll just put it here. You know, just do that for your whole tree. I like this plate a lot because you can be a little bit more messy and kind of do your own thing with it and change it up depending on how you want it to look. So I like that there's freedom in that with this plate. So we'll just want to do this to the big tree. If you really want to, you can do it to the smaller trees. I just like, if we do it on the big tree, it seems that the focus is on this larger tree. So next, what you also can do, you're gonna take the white paint, and you see how it kind of looks like this tree is floating right now? We don't want that. So we're just gonna take some white paint and just make it look like the trees are on a pile of snow. And this will also add some texture if you do it in like thicker globs. I tend to just go for it and do it pretty thickly. And you can also add that lighter blue 34 in here as well to give the snow more color. And I'll go over the whole bottom of snow with this white, and I'll just kind of plop it on like so. Gives it some texture. Here, I'm gonna add some blue in there. Next, we're gonna add our lights to our Christmas tree. You can stop here if you'd like. You don't have to add the lights, but I feel like it gives it more of a Christmas feeling rather than winter. But if you'd rather just be a winter themed plate, feel free to just leave it as the trees. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take red and yellow, which you'll get a small paint pot of these colors, because you really don't need much for this step. We're gonna be creating just little dots throughout the tree randomly. There's no rhyme or reason to where you put it. We're gonna use the end of our brush. So this brush is actually used for a lot of things, as you can tell. We're just gonna make sure it's cleaned, and we're gonna use this round end to our brush as kind of a dotting tool. So I'm just gonna start off with some yellow. You'll wanna dip it in your paint, and then you're gonna wanna just go throughout the tree and just randomly place the dots. It does work better if you let your tree dry a little bit more. So like the snow on the tree, if you let it dry longer than I did, it'll be a little bit better because you won't get the white in the color once you pull up the dotting. I think that's enough for me. So you're just gonna clean it off, and then you're gonna use it with red next. Okay. I'm just gonna add a couple more dots. Also, using the end of the brush, you can add white dots throughout the plate as snowflakes. I didn't choose to do it on this plate, but that's something you can add. So those are all the steps for this plate. Before you bring it back to the studio, you want to make sure that it's fully dry. So you want to leave it out somewhere where nothing can get into it. No dogs, no kids can stick their little fingers in your plate. So you just want to make sure it's fully dry before you pack it up and bring it back to the studio to be fired. And that's all I have for you today. If you're interested in any other of our to-go kits, make sure to go to our website, thestudioforartandcraft.com, or visit us in person at the studio at 576 Main Street in Cobleskill.